Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Miller. I'm the CEO of Folens, and you're all very welcome this evening for the School Leader event. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to come along, and to our guest speakers, who I will be introducing shortly. My promise, if I can make one promise this evening, is we'll try to have this wrapped up within an hour. I know you've had all probably a very busy day, and the last thing you want to do is spend an inordinate amount of time this evening on a screen listening to people like myself rattle on. So we'll try and keep it short and sharp. We have a nice agenda that we'll go through. Again, I'd like to thank the speakers for taking the time this evening themselves, and all those people in Folens for taking the time in preparation and getting the whole event put together. I know it's never easy to do, especially with people like me at the helm trying to click buttons when I shouldn't be. So I'll try and get this running as smoothly as possible. Before we get into the agenda, I just want to reflect a little bit. Like, the last 12 months for everybody has been extraordinary, probably the last 15 months now at this stage. And there's a lot of things now that we would never have dreamt of doing that we are now doing as part of our everyday life, from using technology, how we consume, how we go about our daily lives. And I suppose as we get through this conversation and what our guest speaker Janet will talk about, and also what we'll talk about in relation to homework space itself, there are new ways and new practices that have now evolved and will evolve and continue to evolve long after COVID-19 has disappeared. And what we hope to do over the next 45 minutes, with time for questions and answers at the end, is to really give you a view of how we are able to adapt, how we've been able to look at some technology opportunities, and what the macro situation could be for us all moving forward. So I'm just going to talk you through the agenda. I'm just going to click here. Great. So I'm delighted to have Janet Benson from Learnovate. I'll introduce her now in a minute as our guest speaker, with her aptly titled Lightening the Load of Learning, to give a lovely keynote to setting the whole scene for us. Then I'll ask Conor who is our head of post-primary commissioning, to talk about homework space, the product and the benefits to schools, and then Ciara MacNamara, our head of learning platforms, to talk about the platform and to give a demonstration of it. Afterwards, as I say, we have a question and answer session. And during the course of the evening, if you have questions, please put them into the chat area. Then we'll bring them up at the end of the evening. And again, we'll try and answer as many as we can. I know there's quite a lot of people in this evening, so my best action is to stop talking and to hand over straight over to Janet. Janet is the senior learning and learning lead and senior researcher at Learnovate, and will give us a very interesting and topical view of lightening the load of learning. Janet will explore how we continue to use digital tools to generate culture of sharing and collaboration in the classroom. So with that, and no further ado, I will hand over now to Janet. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can see my screen okay. I'm sure you'll let me know if you can't see it. So I'm just going to try and minimize this a little bit. So as Andy said, I'm going to talk today a little bit about, lightening the load of learning. And I suppose just basically, it's from that really good introduction from Andy, it's very much around, like, what have we learned in the past 12 to 15 months, and what is it that we definitely want to keep as we move forward. And again, as Andy said, we've experienced things in the last 12 to 15 months that we probably thought we'd never experience, and we've learned an awful lot from it as well. So again, I'm going to speak for 10 or 15 minutes, very high level on some of the things that we've learned in the last little while, both from students, from teachers, from our schools, and obviously from our parents as well. So, like, all the people that we've been talking to over the past year or so, and what their experience has been like. So I'm going to talk a little bit about learning before COVID, which you'll all be very aware of, a little bit about the hybrid model that we're kind of calling it at the moment, or that blended learning approach that we've been kind of dealing with recently. What's been working really well, what we feel has worked, and then, look into the future. What are the positives that we can take from the situation? Because we know a lot of us have been sort of forced into the situation and dealing with things that maybe we hadn't sort of planned for. But what are the positives that we can take out of it and that we want to move forward with? And I think that's something that we can do really well, is to look and see, well, what, instead of sort of being reactive, which we've been in the last year or so, how can we be proactive now as we move forward, particularly in relation to technology? So I'm calling this Learning BC, so before COVID. And learning before COVID, was very much kind of focused on those teacher-directed approaches. So very much teacher-focused, which obviously, historically, that's been the way that education has been run, and it's very much focused on a teacher-led approach or a didactic approach to education, and very much reliance on the physical space. So even when we talk about things like collaboration, that we've very much focused on doing that in that physical space, in that face-to-face environment, whereas now we're learning that collaboration is something that we can do very effectively online. So I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. Again, when we talk about the physical space, we're also looking at things like physical items. So we've obviously, to date been very reliant on students bring their school books in and out to school, and reliance on on their physical journals, and as we know, we can kind of do a lot of this online, and ebooks being one of the kind of alternatives to that. So again, let's sort of think about moving away from some of those more physical elements of the education experience. And again, there was some ad hoc use of devices and technologies to date. I know there are a lot of device schools that have been very proactive in bringing technology into the classroom and into students and teachers' lives. But a lot of the schools weren't prepared, obviously, as we know, for this particular situation. And before that, there was a very ad hoc use of devices and technologies where schools were very reactive in relation to, some of the devices, whether some schools allowed, phones to be used in the classroom for educational purposes, whether that was kind of ad hoc, dependent on the teacher, on what was being taught, on the school itself, for example. So again, it was very sort of ad hoc and not necessarily a very consistent approach. And again, even from my own experience a million years ago when I was at school, some activities were quite isolating, or still can be quite isolating for students. So particularly, at home, when we look at things like homework, it can often be quite an isolating activity for a student to sort of work through themselves. And again, we're looking to see how can we make even those sorts of, historically isolating or solitary tasks a little bit more collaborative, and involving sort of as many people as possible in that kind of experience. And again, when we look at, what teachers have been dealing with, I suppose, in up until now, a lot of the work that teachers do, and they talk about it a lot, is, the time-consuming nature of the work that they do, and all that planning, prep, all the assigning of activities and the marking work that has to be done as a teacher. I mean, it's a massive workload, and I think a lot of people outside of the teaching or education sort of practice often think, well, teaching is when you're in the classroom, but as we know, in the education space, there's a huge amount of time-consuming work that students or that teachers engage with. So again, let's look to see how we can lighten some of that load for teachers as well, based on the technology that we have. So I guess moving into that hybrid model, which is kind of what's been happening over the past year or so, we've been learning that there has been some reluctance to change. And I think that's the case with anything new or anything different, and not just obviously in the schools environment. I see it a lot in my work with Learnovate in relation to organizations. It is kind of hard to change in relation to a situation or a context that we're not familiar with. And, that reluctance to change can often be related to, people's fear of new things, or maybe not having the confidence in their tools or their skills and all that kind of stuff. So there has been some a reluctance to change, obviously, but what has also happened is that there's been an increased awareness of equity issues, which I think can only be a positive thing. And there's a lot of talk at the moment around universal design for learning and making sure we're dealing with accessibility issues, particularly in relation to as we develop learning, but also there's equity issues in relation to students, access to technology, to equipment and to devices. So what are the challenges associated with that, whether geographic or social or whatever? So I think the fact that we've noticed that these issues are happening, and it's really kind of come to the forefront of what we've been looking at, I think that's a good thing, because we're a lot more aware of some of those equality issues at the moment, and the fact that we need to address them. I think the role of socially enhanced learning is something that we've learned a lot about in the past, again, when I say 12 to 15 months. I think, we've always been aware that this is an element of the teaching and learning process, but I think its importance and its impact on education and on students in particular has really become a lot more relevant and a lot more noticeable in the past 12 to 15 months. And I think it's something that we need to think about as we move forward. How do we ensure that we continue to have that role of SEL within our educational practice? And I think anyone here, whether it be a teacher, student, obviously we have a lot of school leaders here today, and parents that engagement and motivation issue has really been challenging over the past year, and it comes from that sort of, I guess, either access to technology, it comes from not having explicit sort of collaborative online tasks to work with other students, to work with teachers. It's been very difficult for everybody involved, and we know that the challenges exist there in relation to student engagement and motivation, and not only in the face-to-face environment, but obviously we see that also in the classroom. So we've learned a lot, I think, about how we engage and motivate our students in the online space, which is something that's going to be really beneficial to us, I think, in the future. And that importance of the teacher-student relationship. So I think, again, when we're in that face-to-face, that physical environment, there's sort of that implicit sort of relationship building. But what we're seeing, now is that we have to be more explicit in how we build those relationships between teachers and students. And when we're kind of physically distant from one another, we have to be sort of cognizant of how we build relationships using some digital tools that we have and in that online space. And again, it's something that goes across context. So we see it too when we're looking at the corporate space, when we're bringing new employees, for example, into an organization. We're missing a lot of those sort of water cooler moments. So we're looking to see how can we bring interaction into the online space and build those relationships remotely. And again, that comes with its own challenges. But parental involvement, again, is another one. And I think, that's something that's definitely come to the fore in the last while. And we've seen a lot of really positive parental involvement in student education, but also an awareness, I think, by parents as to the workload that's involved in educating their own children. And I think understanding the role of the teacher has been I think it's provided a real opportunity for parents to understand what exactly it is to be, a teacher, and to understand all the different elements that are involved in that as a practice. And I think that can only be helpful, again, moving forward, where in the past it might often have just been at those parent-teacher meetings where a parent would sort of really, get involved in that process and talk to a teacher, or if something went wrong, which we know, they're the sort of situations in which parents get involved. But I think now, parents are being more proactive in their involvement in their children's education, and I think that's something that we kind of want to think about, considering and facilitating as we move forward. And again, we've looked at a lot at having the priorities being those curricular priorities, and of course that's always going to be the challenge. But again, we have to look and see, well, what's outside of that to kind of cultivate our culture of collaboration and our effective learning with our students, and try not to focus wholly on the curricular priorities. I think that's really important, and we've learned a lot about that and how to kind of manage our time as well, I think. But then some of the positives, I think, what we've seen over the past while is the digital tools that we have, and no matter what it is you're using in the classroom or for homework, it does offer an awful lot of flexibility, both to students in relation to when and how they kind of complete certain activities, but also for teachers. So I like to think about some of the synchronous and asynchronous tasks that we can set for our students that give teachers a little bit of time away from the screen and a little bit of a break, because we know that Zoom fatigue is a big issue at the moment. And offering that flexibility where teachers don't have to be fully on all the time and allow their students to do some offline work has been really, really useful. And it's kind of allowing teachers to kind of be more proactive about how they manage their online time as well. Reaching students at home has been obviously very challenging, but the tools and technologies that we have help to facilitate some of that, and ensuring that even the students who are not necessarily engaging a lot, that we're using some of those tools to kind of try and get our students engaged and working together in that online space. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that in a second. And again, the technology allows for a lot of learning management and admin type activities. So I think, being able to use the tools and technologies that we've been using in the past 12 months to do some of that heavy lifting in relation to administration, school admin, any of that kind of learning management is really useful. So I think, again, when we're moving forward, let's look to see, how do we lighten the load of some of our tasks by using some of the technology to take away some of those, time consuming and kind of difficult tasks. One of the benefits as well, when it comes to flexibility also, I think online and blended and digital learning offer real learner autonomy. So we want, our learners, where possible, and, again, within the confines of the curriculum, that we want our learners to be quite autonomous and to take some level of control over their own learning experience. And I think that, the tools and technologies that we have for digital learning really kind of promote that and really help to provide that flexibility and learner autonomy that perhaps we don't always have in the classroom when you're dealing with, obviously a class of a large amount of students, but it also allows for active learning. So any kind of interactions or activities that we can encourage our students to engage with in the online space kind of takes away that passive learning experience whereby you have the students who are sort of passively, kind of taking in information, whereby we want them to be obviously actively involved in their learning experience and actively involved with both the materials and with each other as students, but also with the teacher in the school itself. And I guess hand in hand with that too, the tools that we have at the moment, the technology is very advanced, and that we can kind of offer that level of personalized learning that again makes the learner feel that this learning is directed for them and at them. And again, that kind of goes in hand with that flexibility and active learning, learner autonomy pieces where the learner is at the center of their own learning experience. And I think that's something again that we could talk about. I think we could do a whole session on that alone, but I think the technology that we have at the moment allows for a lot of that. And then online homework. So as I said, we know that homework can often be kind of an isolating task, kind of a lonely task for students to complete unless we explicitly, set problem solving or collaborative tasks as homework. So I think that one of the positives that's come out of this is that there are really good tools out there for homework that allow, both, I guess, from the student perspective to give them a better experience in relation to their homework, but also for the teachers to be able to set homework and to be able to do some of those tasks that can be quite time consuming, and marking of homework in an online space while they have their students at home. I think that's something that's been really, really interesting, and I'll talk a little bit more detail about that in a second. So what has worked? So at a very high level, I was thinking about some of the things that have worked in general, and I think this applies again across a number of contexts. I think, in speaking to teachers, there's been some really amazing knowledge sharing that's happened in the last year, and teachers I've spoken to in particular are saying that a lot of Facebook groups have popped up, and they learn a lot from teachers who are giving, who are giving sort of podcasts or talking about really good ways of teaching and learning. So I think, I think what's happened in the past, year, and I keep saying 12 to 15 months, but let's just say in the last year, is that, I think a lot of people are learning a lot from each other, and I think we've had to be more collaborative and learning, what's working well in other schools, what are other teachers finding, and it's kind of forced us into that situation whereby, we're not kind of learning and working in a siloed environment. And that's not to say we always were, but I think it's more that the knowledge sharing has become a lot more important, and to learn what works for other schools and other teachers, I think has been absolutely amazing to be able to share and to be able to learn from. And again, when we look at other contexts, I think about even personal things whereby at home, you might have like online quizzing with your family, or you're doing kind of social activities online. It's good to kind of get a feel for what's working in other contexts that we could potentially apply to education and to our educational context and our school context. And I think it's that sort of, not that I don't want to use the term thinking outside the box, but it is sort of thinking about, well, what's working in other areas, or in completely separate situations outside of education, and how can we sort of leverage that for what we need for education. So I think that's been really interesting, and finding out some of that. And I'm not going to mention TikTok, but anyway, I think we've done a lot of talking to and surveying students. Folens have done a lot of work in this space as well. We've talked to parents and teachers a lot, and I think that's been amazing because again, often we kind of we do our teaching, we work with our students, but I think this has kind of made us more aware of understanding what our students' needs are, what are the teachers' needs, and really what are the parents' needs in relation to education in general, and getting a feel for what's happening with people. And that's not even just I guess in a very firmly educational context. I think it kind of relates to things like well-being and having a holistic view of our students and our parents and teachers as people. And again, that goes across the sort of corporate context too, where we're seeing a huge influx in the amount of well-being apps and tools, etc., that are out there and being offered to people, because I guess with the stress of everything that's happened in the last year, we have to be aware of all the things that impact on learning, and when we're aware of that, we get a better understanding of it, then we can better address the challenges that are being faced by our students, our teachers and parents. And again, I've said it already, that useful parental awareness and involvement has been really good in the past while, and we need to look to see, well, how can we continue to kind of get that kind of parental involvement that we want, and how do we facilitate those types of interactions? And if that's through digital, then what are the tools that we can use to continue to do that? And I think that's something, now that we have the parents involved, I think it's something that potentially we want to keep, and how do we do that? So I think that's that's something really interesting to think about. In relation to online homework in particular, again, it can be quite an isolating task, and what we want to do is, generate that culture of collaboration with our students. And with online homework, it does offer students that a kind of a wider range of formats and modes to be able to engage with their homework tasks. And again, it allows the teacher to be quite creative and flexible in how they sort of they set those homework tasks and the different types of tasks that are involved there. So I think, having online homework is something that is a real opportunity to be that bit more creative, or to look to be more collaborative. And I think that's something that's really exciting as we move forward. Again, this is something that teachers have said to me, offering your students kind of choice means that they will be more creative. So again, we want to generate those kind of 21st century skills within our students, and offering this level of choice through homework is a really good way for them to develop skills like those teamwork skills, collaboration, even leadership, and while also kind of learning how to use those basic skills around using particular tools and technologies. So I think, it's a real opportunity for us to kind of do that sort of deeper level of learning and look at those 21st century skills, or those digital skills that we want to instill in our learners when they're quite young, which is a real opportunity. And again, I think there's a definite sort of balance between synchronous and asynchronous activity here. And I think, making the best use of the synchronous online time that you have with your students is vital in this context, and to make sure that students and parents and teachers don't feel completely exhausted at the end of the school day. So as we move forward, I think, again, we've been quite reactive in the past while. I think as we move forward, we can be a lot more proactive in relation to some of these things, and been able to use the live online classes, to get students to like present work, to get feedback, to use it to its absolute maximum, so that we're not using online time necessarily to teach or to provide content, that we're nearly doing that flipping the classroom sort of situation, and using the online time to be as kind of to be as useful as possible and maximize the use of our time. And again, online homework allows us to kind of personalize feedback, and that is something we can obviously do without digital tools. But I think some of the tools that are out there at the moment are very useful in helping teachers to provide that kind of personalized feedback, and it not to be so time consuming, which I think, when we look at teachers, anything that we do, I think that we recommend it from a tools and technologies perspective for teachers has to either save them time or be of enough benefit that they're willing to spend a bit of time on it. So I think anything that saves time is obviously going to be really useful. I think I'm running a little bit short on time, and I don't want to spend too much time, but I have some tools here that I was just going to briefly mention in relation to tools that we can use on top of like the Google Classrooms and all the other tools that we're using. I won't go through them in detail, but I think it's something that we can share after the webinar if anyone wants to get in touch. And obviously, these are tools that we use at Learnovate as well, so can be really beneficial in generating kind of collaborative and problem-solving type activities. So what do we want to retain? So very quickly, that culture of collaboration, as I said already. We want to, continue that culture of collaboration within the school, but also with other schools and between students, teachers and parents, admin, all that kind of amazing collaborative work that's been happening. The parental support, which I've already spoken about. Lightening the load for teachers, we're all aware of the TPCK, and again, we found that there's been a less reliance on that the physical objects in the space, that has helped to lighten some of that load for teachers. And it also provides a lot of choice for our students. So again, when I think of my own nieces who are at different levels of their schooling, one is at transition year and one is at leaving cert, one of them in particular actually prefers the online space and feels that she performs a lot better working online and being an online student. So again, it's offering a level of choice for students as well, but also in relation to things like the process, the content that they're getting, as well as the learning environment. So maybe it's worth thinking about, are we going to continue with this hybrid or blended where possible, and offering students a level of choice about how they engage with their learning. And a really amazing thing that's happened again in the last year is that we have these really talented upskilled teachers who are able to do a lot of things with technology. And again, sometimes against their will to this point, but I think, we have teachers who are willing to learn, who are willing to upskill, and that can only be a good thing really for the future. So I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to say, in general, consistency is vital. So that whole school approach, we've been seeing the ad hoc approaches that have happened in the last 12 months have been quite difficult for students to kind of get a grip on, if a different teacher is having a different approach or using different technology, that can be very difficult for both the teacher and for the school, but also for the students. So again, we need to look at having a whole school approach to any technologies or approaches that we're bringing into the school, setting clear expectations for everyone. That includes like the teachers and the students. So what is it, we want them to be able to do? What tools do we want them to use? When do we want them to be online? I think being very clear about that in the future is going to be really, really helpful to make sure that everyone's on board and understands what's going to happen at different times. We need to provide learning on the tools. Again, we can't assume, especially with young people, just because, I don't like the term digital natives, but, just because they can use technology for certain things, it doesn't necessarily mean they can use something like PowerPoint. So we need to provide the learning so they have that level of confidence before they even start to use a tool. And again, mixing, the asynchronous and asynchronous, I think is obviously very important. Just to finish up, I just wanted to say, I think it's a really good point that in the last year, we've all been learning together. And I think it's really good to be explicit about that, particularly with students, to say, look, we're all learning, we're learning in this together, and we're all on board doing the same thing. So I think, as we make mistakes, I think it's okay to do that and forgive ourselves, and to say to the students, look, we're in this together. You can help out as well. If I make mistakes, you can come up with an idea about how we might fix it. And I think, showing that we're all willing to learn, I think, is such an important thing within education. So I really like this quote about sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And I'm going to stop it there and go back to Andy.
Thanks, Janet. And as always, that is a really, really good insight. And thank you very much. And thank you to the folks at Learnovate, because, from our own business perspective, we work very closely with Learnovate on lots of different areas, as Janet has mentioned. And, it is really, really important that, as people like us in our business, that we understand our role and the value that our content can be in no matter what use case that we use, and whether that's online or through physical content. It's how the content is used in context to their own environments for teachers and for students. And definitely the pandemic has helped us. And and as we move from what Janet was saying to now what Conor Walker, and I'm going to just introduce Conor now. Conor, as I said, is our head of post-primary commissioning and publishing within Folens. And we've since launching Homework Space, we have seen incredible feedback from those schools, from the pilot program we launched all the way through to the number of schools we have now on board in such a short time, and how well it's resonating not only with the teachers, the schools and the students. And time, and Janet touched about time, and I know, Conor, you're going to talk in more detail around the time-saving aspect for teachers. It is, it is great when you launch a product, and as our business has been transforming over the years, being able to bring Homework Space to market a year ahead of where we had intended to, given all that was happening with the pandemic, it just again reinforces that our business, like all businesses, have to change during the pandemic and go and change moving forward. So I'm delighted to introduce Conor Walker. Conor, the stage is yours, the screen is yours, and away you go.
Perfect. Thanks, Andy. Thanks also, Janet, that was really interesting, and there's lots of nuggets in there, I think, that are sort of echoed in what we've done with Homework Space. I think that whole idea of lightening the load, and the concept of us even living and teaching in a world after COVID, and that whole life after COVID concept, I think is very interesting. But what I'm just here to do, I suppose, just to sort of dovetail a little bit from what Janet's done, is to talk a little bit about our Homework Space product, and to give you a little bit of a sense of what it is. Hopefully I'll be able to explain some of the benefits which you might recognize, I suppose, from what Janet has said in her presentation. And also just to give you a sense of the product structure, how it works, and give you a sense of the full suite of the Homework Space product. So to start with, I guess, just to answer the question of what it is, Homework Space, it's a new digital product that we're bringing out, which is curriculum aligned, and it comprises ready-made homework assignments. And it's pretty straightforward the way that it works, really. What happens is that the teacher sets the homework, then the students go into the system, into Homework Space, and they answer their questions, they submit their answers and submit their homework. And then that's recorded by the system, which it marks automatically for every student, and then the teacher can review the results and track progress of their classes over time. And the thing about as well homework space is we're very conscious that it needs to be an independent product. It's not tied in with any Folens textbook, and it's not tied in with obviously any other educational publisher's book. If you're using a textbook or not using a textbook, it's an independent solution that you'll be able to use with your classes. So very much the benefits of how it will help schools is tied in with that whole concept of hybrid learning and blended learning and lightening the load of teachers in the schools in this kind of life and this world that we'll be living in after COVID. So it supports a blended learning or hybrid learning solution that allows a consistent whole school approach to digital homework setting, marking across multiple subjects. From a progress tracking point of view, it's a very easy solution for teachers to use. And they can either take a class view or a specific student view on progress and be able to, if necessary, intervene and to help their students along the way. And obviously, for that reason, we really believe that it's something that will help to save time, will help to lighten the load for teachers in the work that they need to do, and maybe allow them to focus on other core areas such as planning. And it's an engaging product as well, we believe. So rather than just the standard approach to taking homework through printed media, it allows students to, I suppose, to engage with a wider range of formats and modes of learning and knowledge consolidation. And ultimately, that helps students to practice and reinforce their learning. So I'll just step through now the different subjects that we have available in homework space. And we've got a range of 8. We've got maths, higher level and ordinary level. We've got junior cycle Irish, higher level and ordinary level. Then we have the MFL subjects, French, Spanish and German. We have homework space for science, for geography and for history as well. And to now just give you a sense then of the product structure and how it's aligned to the curriculum. I guess the best way of looking at homework space is to think of it as, in some respects, like a textbook. Its structure is quite similar to it. So you've got a set of chapters within that product, within that homework space subject, and we call those units. And then within each unit, there's a series of homework assignments on the key topics or skills that the student needs to learn for that particular subject area, for that knowledge area. And then at the end of every unit, it concludes with a final test, which is very much like the revision section at the end of your chapter. Oops, I'll just take a step back, jumping ahead of myself. So this is an example of how it would work for junior cycle geography. This is how a unit is structured. And for a subject like geography, because it's more content driven, the homeworks within the unit are much more topic focused. So as you can see there, the green tiles represent the homeworks, 3.1 through to 3.4. And we cover topics like, in this case, it's on earthquakes. So what are earthquakes, how they're measured, what the impacts of earthquakes are, and how you respond or mitigate against them. And within each of those homeworks, there's about 8 questions, which the student completes and submits. And again, that's recorded in the system. And then at the end of your unit or your chapter, then there's that 3.5 tile, which is a little bit different to the other activities, which is a summative test or final test at the end of the unit, where the student is asked to answer questions on the preceding units 3 or homeworks 3.1 through to 3.4. And in the case of a subject like German, it's quite similar as well. You've got your homework assignments or activities. In this case, it's 6.1 through to 6.6, but there's a bit more of a skills focus for language. So 6.1 would cover vocabulary. 6.2 is also a vocabulary unit for German. 6.3 covers grammar. 0.4 is then a reading comprehension activity. We go back to grammar in 6.5, and then we have a listening activity with audio 6.6. And then again, similar to what we looked at for geography, 6.7 is your final test, your summative test that allows the student to practice what they covered in the preceding homeworks. And just to give you a sense of how the macro looks, this is a breakdown of the entire geography product. And as I mentioned earlier, very similar to a textbook structure where you've got your unit or your chapter titles, and then within that then you have usually about 3 to 4 homeworks and then the final test at the end of it. And as you can see, in this case, you're starting with the fundamental physical geography topics like plate tectonics, volcanoes, and earthquakes. You progress then through physical geography, and then moving into sort of the middle part of this homework space product, you have got glacial landscapes, weather forecasting. We move then more into the second strand of the specification, and then you finish then in the latter chapters covering more the economic geography side of things. And just so it doesn't appear like that I'm perhaps making it up or blowing homework space trumpet too much, we conducted some research recently with our current homework space teachers, and they've been using it for a couple of months now, and we were able to get some really positive ratings from them on homework space. So this slide just steps you through some of the star ratings that they would have given the product overall. And there was consistently a 5-star rating for the product. So on structure, we got 5 stars. Question quality and variety, we also rated very highly. And on the quality of question feedback, it was also rated very highly. So that was very pleasing and kind of a really good endorsement of the hard work I think that the homework space team have put into its development from start through to finish. And then another thing, again, tying in with all of what Janet said about the lightening of the load for teachers and for school administration, we asked the question just on average, how much time do teachers think that homework space would save them from setting and marking homework each week? And as you can see from this pie chart, there was a very strong validation, I suppose, of what we were trying to do with homework space. In teachers believed that for each week, for every class, that they would be saving at least 1 to 2 hours per week. That's what the majority of our teachers felt. So that was really pleasing, and hopefully the benefits of that then will be felt from future schools who will use homework space and allow teachers maybe to save time and focus on other areas of teaching as we move into this life, this post-COVID world.
I didn't expect that to happen so quickly. So Conor, thank you for that. I was watching the feedback that was coming in, so apologies. Lots of great feedback there for Janet's presentation, so that's great, Janet. And one question was asked, will we be sharing the slides? Yes, we will work out a way to put the presentation up. So that's there. So Janet, lots of thumbs up for your presentation. So now we are moving on to Ciara MacNamara, and as I said earlier on, Ciara is our head of digital learning platforms, and she's now going to take us through a demonstration of how homework space works from time you log in to all the way through to the various modules as Conor has outlined. So thank you, Conor, and welcome, Ciara, and I'll leave it to you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Andy. Everyone should be looking at my screen now and at our Folens Hive website. So essentially, my role in the homework space product is I work with the team to design the functionality for the product on the site. And I'm going to take you through the main tasks that your teachers and students would have to complete while using it. So these are essentially to set the homework, for the student to go in then and complete the homework assignment, and then finally for teachers to view the student's progress on that assignment. So if I log in as a teacher for the first step, and So you can see here that the homework space product just sits in the library alongside any of the other Folens titles you might be using. I'm going to jump into the geography one. Okay, and so what you can see here on the left-hand side is the table of contents, similar to what Conor was speaking about, in terms of these are all of the units for geography. And then within each unit, you can see the breakdown of the homework assignments and then the final test at the end. And here on the right-hand side of the screen, what you're viewing is a preview of the questions that are contained in that homework assignment. So the teacher can actually scroll through these along with what the correct answers are, but they can scroll through and check the content before they actually go ahead and assign it. So what I'll do now is, if you see this button in the top right-hand corner, in order to assign an activity, the teachers go in here. And this brings up the form for assigning the homework. So the first step is to select what activities you want to assign. So you can select multiple activities to assign at once, if you want, by just clicking through here. I'm going to keep it simple and just assign one for the moment. And then the second step here is to decide who you are assigning the work to. So again, if I just click in here to assign to one of my classes, these are all the classes that I as a teacher am teaching. I'm just going to select the second year geography class for this one. And one of the things to bear in mind here is that students won't actually see any of this content until the teacher assigns it to them. So, and it also means that they can't see what the teachers assign to other students in the class. So there is the option to actually assign this to individual students, and basically nobody else in the class would know. So there's a good opportunity for differentiation here if it's needed. The final step in the process then is to basically set your deadline. So you can make it you can choose when to make the assignment available from. So if I click in here, I could choose to plan ahead and say set assignments for next week if I wanted. I'm just going to select today's date, so this becomes immediately available for the students. And then I'm going to set a deadline. And again here, so I'm going to select Thursday. And what this basically means is this is when the content is available for students to go in and complete the work. After this point, they're told that they've missed the deadline. If you still want students to be able to submit late, that's possible, and you just select the checkbox here. So now I'm going to assign this activity. I can see that's been sent to the students. So now I'm just going to log out and log back in as a student, so we actually see what the student sees. Okay, so the first thing that you'll notice here is that the homework space product has actually been added into the student's library. So if they are using any other Folens titles, they'll also appear in the library here. Now, as I said before, students can't access the content until it's been assigned to them. So the teacher is still completely in control of the pace of learning. If I just click in here to show you what they do see. Again, they've got access to this full table of contents, so they can see what content is going to be covered. But you might have noticed here, there's these little padlocks that are appearing beside each of the assignments, which means it hasn't been unlocked yet, or the teacher hasn't actually assigned the activity to them. So once the teacher has assigned the activity, in the case of the 2.1 volcano formation cycle, which we just did, they're actually able to go in and access it from here. But really, the advantage of this is that this will become a record of their learning. So once they've actually completed the activity, they can always come back here and view their scores, and it's structured in a way that they can see their progress across all of the topics. But rather than complete the activity from here, what I want to show you is how students will actually access this the first time they log in. And that is in relation to this assignment section. So when they land here, what will happen is the first time a student actually logs in and they have homework set for them, they'll be redirected to this page. And so you can see here under the due tab that the activity that I've just assigned is here. And also this little alert that appears over the assignment section, both of these will appear in place until the student actually completes the work. So if I log back out now and come back in, because I haven't completed the homework, I'm still going to be, redirected to this page. So students have no excuses for missing their homework. So to access the homework activity, I'm just going to click into the activity to start it. And so the activity immediately launches, and students have, there's a variety of information here that I just want to point out. So students are able to see how many questions they have to complete. They're signposted of where they actually are in terms of progress in the test. And then for each question, they're told how many attempts they have at the question and the number of marks that are available for that question. And so I'm actually going to just take you through, we won't do the whole test, but I'll take you through a few of them so you can see what the experience is like. So question 1, this diagram shows the parts of a volcano. What is part A? So this is the ash cloud, so I can come down here and select this. And you might have noticed that this check answer button now becomes enabled as soon as I select an answer. And so what Conor was talking about in terms of we have in each unit, you've got the homework assignments, and then at the end, you've got this final test. What we've arranged is that for all the homework assignments, students will get immediate feedback as they go through the test. So there's this opportunity for learning still as they progress. So if I select check answer, I can see that this activity this question has been marked correct, and I've been given feedback on it. And so I don't have to wait until the end of the test to find that out. And again, here I can see that I've been awarded 2 marks for having answered it correctly. So if I now go in and get one wrong, so the diagram shows parts of the volcano. What is part B? We'll select the ash and cinder cloud again. So here now, again, there's 2 marks available for this question. And if I submit my answer, you can see that it's been marked incorrect. And I'm actually told what the correct answer is. So I should have selected part B. Part B is the crater. And I haven't been awarded any marks for this question now as I got it wrong. So I'm just going to skip ahead so I can maybe see some other question types that we have. Okay, this is a good example. This is a fill in the blank style question. And you can see here that students have 4 marks available for this question because they're answering a bit more. There's the 4 different items they have to select. So if I just select some answers here, so volcano forms when magma moves to the surface of the earth through an opening called, I'm gonna get one wrong, crack. When magma reaches the surface, it is known as lava, and repeated lava flows will build up around the vent to form cone-shaped mountains. So a mixture of answers there. So again, when I select the check answer button, I can immediately see that I didn't get the answer fully correct. So I can see what part of the question that I failed to answer correctly. But again, what's happened here is I have got three parts or 3 sections of the question that I've answered correctly, and so we've actually awarded the student 3 marks for having answered that. So we're not penalising them when they don't know the answer. We're rewarding them for every bit of information that they do know. And again, they are given the correct answer here, so they've got that opportunity for learning as they go through the test. So here we've got an association or a matching activity. So I just have to select, so volcano is not expected to occur in the future is a dormant one, or, oh no, an extinct one. A volcano has not erupted for some time is dormant, and then one that erupts regularly is active. So I just drag those into place. And again, they're all marked correctly. If I got that wrong, it would have been highlighted in red as well, and I'd have been told what was the correct answer. So, okay, so once students have completed the test, they then submit the test or submit the assignment, which is double checked. And at the end here, they're presented with their score. So obviously, if this was the final test in the unit of work, they'd only be presented with their score at this point. So they just would click through the answers and be brought on to the next question without actually getting that feedback. And then at the end, they are presented with how they've performed. So once they've submitted the assignment, what I want to point out here is that the actual assignment itself is now moved into this mark section of assignments. So if I jump back into the due tab, there's no longer any assignments there. They've completed it and it's been moved over. You'll also notice that the little alert that was on the assignment section is also gone. So what is nice about this is that students can log back in at any point and review their performance. So they've actually got access to this assignment indefinitely. They can scroll through not only just what answers that they submitted, but what's the correct answer as well. So they can use it for revision if they need to revisit it at a later point. So now I'm going to log out of that and log back in as a teacher for the final step in the process. Actually, while I'm here, I'm just going to take the opportunity to show you, this is the Spanish homework space product, but for all of our MFL subjects and for our Irish, we use a lot of audio. So essentially, you'll be able to kind of click into the activities and you can see that we use audio for these and they work with different activity templates. I actually just preview the activity the way a student would. I'm just going to play you some of the audio.
Mi nombre se escribe J-O-R-G-E.
Okay, so just, yeah, this works with a variety of different templates and it's been incorporated into all of the MFLs. I jump out of that now. And what I want to show you as the final step in the process is what teachers will see once the students have actually submitted their work. So for that, I'm going to go to this Manage Assignment section. And this will list all of the assignments that the teacher has set. So this is obviously my very first assignment that I set as this teacher. But you can see here that I can filter, you know, according to which class I'm looking at. So if I was going back to my first year class, I haven't assigned anything to them. This is the one that I've just assigned to the second year geography class. And you can see here the due date. Once the due date is actually passed, this text will go red. So there's kind of something to catch the eye when you log back in. And I can see here also how many students have actually submitted their answers. So I logged in earlier and added some dummy data here so that we have, you can see what it would be like if there's more than one student who has submitted the work. So what I want to show you here is that you get an overview basically of which students have actually submitted the work from the class, what their score, their performance is. If you want, you can delve in deeper. So you might think, you know, Abdul's score isn't great, so you might want to review that in more detail. You can open his assignment and look through this and see exactly what he's answered to the questions in the assignment. I can also see who hasn't submitted the work and give them a nudge that they still need to submit it. And then I think one of the nicer reports that we have here is if you want to delve in across to identify if there might be problem areas, so where the class hasn't as a whole grasped a concept. You can see that this comparison report essentially lists all the kids in your class or in the teacher's class and all the questions in the quiz. So you can see really quickly, okay, just from the students who have submitted responses so far, that actually like question 2, no one's getting that right. So that might be an area that needs a bit more attention or focus, which you could cover off in class, whereas some of the others aren't as problematic. Okay, well, I think that is your whistle-stop tour of the Hive, or of Homework Space. So I might just stop sharing my screen.
We have lots of questions coming in, Ciara. So while we're still with you, I'll just ask you a quick question. Do all students need to complete all of the questions before doing the test? That's one of the questions that came in.
So do they have to complete? So when they're doing the test, they're forced to answer every question. When they're doing their homework assignments, they can actually skip through questions, but as a teacher, you'll know if they've skipped. So it's not like they can just skip and they're going to get marked, you know, no marks for that particular question if they do try and skip it.
Okay, that's great, thank you. What I'll do is I'll just finish off the slides that we were doing, and then I'll come back with, there's quite a few questions. I'll merge them into all, but very quickly, I just want to give people the pricing and information around that. So the pricing is bundled. The way we have bundled it is it's a school subscription priced on a per student basis. So on a per subject basis, it's €8.50 if an individual subject is taken. It's an annual subscription. If 3 subjects are chosen, it's €21 per student for 3 subjects. So you can see there's incremental discount, and the premium offering is €29.50 per student for all subjects. So as the product range is expanded out to the 8 products at junior cycle, the pricing gets incrementally less. So again, we're talking on a per 1 subject basis, less than €1 per month for a student. So I think we've priced it in a very aggressive manner to encourage schools, students and parents to take on board. The number of questions that are going to come through. If you want further details, we have Brian McGarvey, who is our homework space specialist. So he can not only provide demonstrations, a bit like what Ciara has done, or we can do some demos. Also, we have a lot of information and video feedback, or video information on our website on folens.ie. So all of these can be accessed, and again, if anybody's looking for further information from that. I just want to, just again, conscious of time, move on to the questions and answers. So if I can stop sharing my screen, Elizabeth, you may need to tell me how to do that, and I will do that, I think. Yes. Okay. So questions, I'm going to compile them in sort of into composite questions. So Janet, I have a couple for you. What would you recommend for students that are not engaging online?
Oh, okay. There's that's a big question.
In 1 second.
Can you just give me one word answer? Yeah, a really good question, actually. And again, something we've been seeing a lot in the past year, obviously. But I think it comes down to offering choice again. I think it's very important that when we're trying to engage students in that online space, that we're making sure that we're setting the expectations for when they sort of need to be online, when they need to be synchronously doing activities, when they need to have their video on is another one. So again, you know, we're all conscious of the Zoom fatigue thing, and again, offering the students the chance to not have the video on all the time is probably quite useful. And I know that's difficult for some teachers who like to make sure that they can see everything that's happening, but I think giving them the option sometimes to turn off the camera is really good. I think trying to get them engaged through those collaborative activities is really important. And one thing that we found definitely when we're looking at things like when we do collaboration online, particularly with students, is making sure that everyone has a role to play in those collaborative tasks, because it allows for the fact that some of the students, you know, tend to kind of act like lurkers, and they don't kind of participate in sort of that online activity or the problem solving or whatever. But if you assign a role to everybody, whether it's note taker, leader, you know, whatever it is, they come back to the wider group and share whatever it is they've been doing, maybe in a in a breakout room. I think, you know, making sure that everyone has a part to play in it, I think is really important. Personalizing communications using students' names is really important, making them feel like even though they're sitting at home potentially on their own, that, you know, that they're still part of the school environment. So I think it's any of those kind of, you know, involving the students in interaction or collaboration with each other, with the teacher, and not, you know, kind of focusing on the very much I'm teaching you today kind of thing. Making, you know, as we were saying, kind of, you know, fostering that culture of collaboration, I think is really important. But again, offering them choice and giving them a break to do some asynchronous activities offline and come back and share some of those activities online, I think is a really good way to do it, because they're more than the rest of us. We're all quite tired with being on screens all the time. And I'm sure the students as much as anybody else.
And I assume the role of parents also in that context as well is for the parents to be actively engaged.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, I think it's really important for us to look at what we want the parental role to be, and the parental role is not to be. I mean, we're talking about, you know, remote learning at the moment. We're not talking about homeschooling, and I think sometimes, you know, when we started in this process, a lot of people were confusing the two and saying, well, I'm homeschooling my children now, but the teachers are still teaching. What we want from the parents, I think, is to provide sort of a support role, or sort of a, you know, that additional support at home, whereby is it, you know, helping with the students' well-being, or making sure they're set up properly to engage in their activities, or whatever it is. We're not asking, you know, the parents to be the teacher in these situations. So I think it's very important to set the expectations around what the teacher does, what the parent does, and then, you know, how we come together to kind of help the student. I think that's the main thing.
And I suppose certainly being back in school has made it a little bit easier, but I think things like online homework and homework space does require parental intervention and parental help at home in context. Moving on, because just conscious of time for everybody. Conor, a couple of questions again. I'm going to take an amalgamation of several questions and put them into two short-winded questions, I hope. Are we bringing out any other subjects in junior cycle is part A, and then a number of people asking, what about Leaving Cert? So probably a roadmap type question, Mr. Walker.
Roadmap, okay. Absolutely. I suppose initially what we wanted to do was we wanted to target the subject areas that were most common to start with junior cycle, which is what we've done by bringing out the 8 subjects that we have. But there has been, it seems, expression of interest around other subject areas, so we'll absolutely look into that and assess what the feasibility is to develop more and expand the homework space kind of suite, I suppose, of subjects beyond what it is currently. For Leaving Cert, yeah, absolutely. That's a question that we've been asked about already. I think we probably need to just do a little bit more research to validate whether homework space is the product for Leaving Cert, or whether the requirements for Leaving Cert homework setting or study or revision is something different that would require another product, but it's certainly something that's in our line of sight.
Okay, thank you, Conor. Again, just a couple of ones to wrap up with. Andy, is the pricing shown on a per year basis? Yes, sorry if I didn't clarify it. The pricing is an annual subscription, so on a school year basis. Ciara, does the solution work on mobile phones? I think you may not have your volume on.
Apologies. So we recommend that you use it on a larger screen. As you saw there, we use lots of graphics, audio content, big displays. So the optimal viewing is on a desktop, laptop, or an iPad, or Android device, Android tablet.
Okay, thank you, Ciara. Folks, I'm going to wrap it up there. There are lots of questions still coming in. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution from the presenting side, and thank you more importantly to all of you who took part. Just to say that we will be sending out a copy of the webinar with Janet's speech, because I know there's a number of people looking for the tools and some of the things that also you were recommending, Janet. So again, we will put all this up, and I will let the good people in our marketing team figure out how we will do that. I'd just like to say, on behalf of everybody in Folens, thank you very much for listening. Thank you again to our speakers. Janet, thank you so much as a guest coming in. Have a good evening. We overrun by a few minutes, but we'll forgive ourselves this time, and have a safe evening, and take care, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks a million.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.